During the 20th century there was increasing marine pollution as the number of ships and their size increased. The pollution of most concern was oil. Its increasing transport as cargo led to routine operational pollution as cargo tanks were cleaned out. Public concern about oily beaches resulted in a number of international conferences, which finally led to the adoption of the Marpol Convention in 1954. 20 years later, the Marpol Convention was considered to need replacement for several reasons. Most notably, Marpol was voluntary and contained weak enforcement powers. Several tanker accidents had occurred, resulting in serious pollution, notably the Torrey Canyon. When Marpol was introduced, it had 5 annexes, each covering one source of pollution. Only Annexes 1 and 2 were mandatory. Growing worldwide recognition of the problems caused by the other types of pollution has gradually led to the voluntary annexes becoming mandatory, and a 6th annex being added. There are 5 main types of pollution in the marine environment: oil pollution, chemical pollution, sewage pollution, garbage pollution, and air pollution. Click on the buttons to find out more about how ships can cause them. Oil became increasingly popular as a fuel and as a raw material for chemical plants during the 20th century, with much of it transported by ships. The cargo oil tanks were routinely washed out with water between cargoes, and the oily mixture was pumped overboard. Oil tankers grew ever larger, so pollution following collisions, groundings, and the like became more damaging. Chemical pollution of the sea had become a problem by the 1970s because the increasing volumes of chemicals being used required their carriage by ship, both in bulk and in packaged form. Some of these cargoes entered the sea following accidents, or as routine operational pollution after tank cleaning. Sewage pollution from ships became a problem, as improved sewage treatment ashore made sewage from ships more obvious. Passenger ships grew in size and produced larger, more noticeable volumes of sewage, especially when moored or anchored. Garbage in the sea became a real problem due to the combined effects of increasing volumes from land and ship sources and an increasing proportion of plastic, which takes much longer to break down in the environment. Since Marpol was first written, research has shown that some gases can damage the environment ashore and the global climate. Again, as pollution sources ashore became more regulated, pollution from ships became more obvious and eventually regulated. Some Marpol annexes require ships to be surveyed and issued with certificates. This is mainly because the previous anti-pollution convention was considered to have failed due to lack of enforcement, but also because compliance with some Marpol rules cannot easily be proven while the ship is in service. A certificate can show compliance has been checked. Apart from Marpol surveys, your ship may be subject to port state or flag state inspections between surveys to ensure that the rules continue to be complied with. In Marpol, a pollution incident is defined as a discharge or probable discharge above the Marpol permitted levels. Marpol requires pollution incidents to be reported, so that action can be taken to clean up the pollution. You have now reached the end of this chapter, which has introduced some of the thinking behind the Marpol Convention. We have considered a brief history of how the Marpol Convention came to be, the reasons for its 6 annexes, why ships sometimes need Marpol surveys and certificates, and what a pollution incident is, and the reason for reporting one. Before moving on to the next chapter, you should complete the following self-test questions to check what you have learned so far. After completing this chapter, the learner will, with reference to Marpol Annex 1, know the goals of Marpol Annex 1, know what the term oil means according to Annex 1, be aware of the effects of oil in the sea, be aware of the kind of operational discharges of oily mixtures that are allowed from all ships and the restrictions placed on them, be aware that Annex 1 defines special areas, be aware of the kind of accidental discharges of oil or oily mixtures that may occur from all ships and the measures in place to minimize them, be aware of what should be done to minimize the environmental damage caused following oil pollution of the water after an oil spill from a ship. The main goal of Marpol Annex 1 is to reduce the harm to the environment resulting from oil pollution from ships. Annex 1 of Marpol defines oil as oil coming from petroleum, not plants. Plant oils are considered as Annex 2 chemicals. Biofuels, made from blends of petroleum and plant oils, may come under Annex 1 or 2, depending on the blend. When oil from petroleum gets in the sea, it causes harm by acting as a poison, physically damaging life by coating it or blocking the sunlight. Ships of any type may make operational discharges of oil. For example, discharges of oily bilge water, mainly those from machinery spaces, or discharges of water ballast carried in fuel tanks. Let us now look at the restrictions Annex 1 places on these in more detail. Some important restrictions depend on whether the ship is inside or outside one of the areas which Annex 1 identifies as special areas. An area is declared as a special area where, for reasons of its nature and its sea traffic, special protection is required. The special areas are listed in the current edition of Marpol. Discharges of oily bilge water are not allowed unless oil filtering equipment is used. This is commonly known as a bilge separator or oily water separator. On large ships, an oil content meter, alarm and automatic stop system must be used at all times. 2 sets of criteria to be met are listed in Annex 1, dependent on whether the ship is inside or outside a special area. The only difference is that discharges can only be made inside special areas if an oil content meter, alarm and automatic stop system is in use. The Antarctic is an extra special area. Discharge of oil or an oily mixture into the sea is banned while inside the Antarctic. Ships are not usually allowed to carry ballast in fuel tanks, but on some types of ships, such as long-distance tugs, it is unavoidable. Special conditions are applied before discharge of oily ballast is allowed. Oily water separators do not get rid of the oil, they only separate it from the water before the water is discharged overboard. The oil residues separated off must be collected and retained on board in a sludge tank until it can be disposed of ashore or by other approved means, such as burning in an incinerator or the ship's boiler. In exchange for cleaner seas and beaches, the states which have signed the convention are required to provide reception facilities for the oily mixtures that ships are banned from discharging into the sea. To make discharge ashore easier, each ship must have a pipe to deck with a standard discharge connection available. Ships certified under Marpol Annex 1 must carry an oil record book, Part 1, Machinery Space Operations. The record book contains a list of the operations to be recorded and the codes to use when making entries. We all know that accidents can happen, and Annex 1 tries to prepare for accidental discharges of oil from a ship. These include accidental discharges during oil transfer operations, following equipment failures, following collision or grounding. Let us now look at how Annex 1 tries to deal with these in more detail. Spills may occur at any time during oil transfer operations, from leaky hoses, pipelines and connections, or tanks may overflow. These kinds of spills will frequently occur on the deck of a ship, allowing some chance of cleanup before the sea becomes polluted, although Marpol does not require a deck edge designed to retain oil. Ships certified under Marpol Annex 1 must have a Shipboard Oil Pollution Emergency Plan, or SOPEP. The SOPEP will contain shore contact details, so the master can make a report if there has been or is likely to be an oil spill. In addition, the SOPEP should provide a detailed description of the actions to be taken immediately by persons on board to reduce or control the discharge of oil following any of the types of incident mentioned above. On most ships, special oil cleanup equipment will have been supplied, and its location recorded in the plan. The crew should have carried out training and drills to improve crew response to a spill. Should a routine discharge of oil be made which is found to be illegal, for example, the oil content alarm has failed to sound, or the discharge from the separator has not automatically stopped, the discharge should be stopped as soon as the failure is noticed. A responsible officer must be informed so that reporting and clean-up procedures can be put into operation immediately. Again, the SOPEP may contain useful guidance. Most ships are not allowed to carry oil in 4 peak tanks, where it is most exposed to damage and leakage in the event of a collision or grounding. To limit bunker spills from new ships following collision or grounding, their fuel tanks are required to be positioned away from the hull. The carriage of heavy oils in the Antarctic area is now banned due to the difficulty of cleaning them up in cold conditions and the remoteness of the area. The first response is usually to try to contain the oil. This prevents widespread damage and makes it easier to remove using physical means, such as absorbents, brooms, spades, or vacuum skimmers. The use of inappropriate chemical dispersants can cause worse pollution than the oil alone. It is often the case that the local government's permission is required before they are used. We have now reached the end of this chapter on Marpol Annex 1 as it applies to all types of ships. We have considered the main goal of Annex 1, what Marpol Annex 1 means by oil, the likely sources of operational and of accidental pollution, Be aware of the additional types of accidental discharges of oil that may occur from oil tankers and the measures in place to minimize them. Oil tankers make additional types of operational discharges of oily mixtures when it is necessary to dispose of water which has been mixed with oil cargo. This will normally occur when the cargo tanks need to be cleaned or ballasted. Annex 1 requires most crude oil tankers to be fitted with crude oil washing systems, so water washing is used as little as possible. Even on a crude oil tanker, water washing of cargo tanks will be necessary sometimes. Annex 1 requires oil tankers to be provided with at least one slop tank to allow collection of tank washing water, and to allow the oily mixture to settle out before the clean water is discharged overboard. The discharge criteria for tank washings are different to those for machinery space bilge water. Within a special area, no discharges of oil from the cargo area are allowed. Outside special areas, Marpol has conditions that must be satisfied. These require the ship to be on passage, be a minimum distance from land, limit the rate of oil discharge, and the total amount of oil to be a small proportion of the cargo loaded. The rate of discharge of oil and the total quantity discharged are measured using Oil Discharge Monitoring Equipment, ODME. In the event of the oil content exceeding a Marpol limit, or the ODME failing, the overboard discharge will be stopped automatically. As a double check, oil-contaminated water from cargo tank areas is led to the open deck or to the ship's side above the waterline so that it can be visually checked for oil traces. Most crude oil tankers are required to be designed to minimize oil retention and to have the means to drain pump and line residues so they can be discharged ashore or to a ship's tank. Sometimes the residues can be mixed with the next cargo. Otherwise, they will need to be discharged to shore reception facilities. A special small diameter line is provided to allow the residues to be discharged ashore. Most tankers are required to have segregated ballast tanks and pipelines, so that ballast and cargo do not mix. An Oil Record Book Part 2, Cargo/Ballast Operations, must be completed each time any of the cargo or ballast operations listed in the front take place. The ODME is fitted with a recording device to provide a continuous record of the discharge. Accidental discharges of oil may occur from oil tankers, such as spills during loading and discharge of cargo, especially during ship-to-ship operations, oil leakage following collision or grounding, cargo tank leakage, and leaks following other casualties, such as fire or explosion, hull failure, excessive list, containment system failure, submergence or foundering, wrecking or stranding. Oil transfer spills on tankers are potentially much more serious than on other types of ships, and Annex 1 deals with both by requiring that a SOPEP is available on board. As described in the previous chapter, the SOPEP will provide directions on the immediate actions to take and contact details for the local authorities. A new chapter has been added to Annex 1 to regulate the increasing use of STS operations. Oil tankers involved in STS operations have to carry an approved plan describing how to conduct STS operations. A qualified person should be in overall advisory control of STS operations. Oil tankers have to have ballast or void tanks in a protective location outboard of the cargo to provide a measure of protection in the event of collision. Most tankers are now required to have a double hull, which also gives protection to the cargo from grounding. Carriage of heavy oils is now only allowed in double hull tankers. There are rules to improve the chances of the ship remaining afloat and stable following damage to a space. Having tanks in protective locations also means that oil from a cargo tank may leak into a normally oil-free ballast tank, rather than directly into the sea. There is then a chance that the oil will be discharged with the ballast into the sea. The discharge of ballast water from cargo tank areas is required to be above the waterline, unless the surface of the ballast has been examined visually immediately before the discharge, to ensure that no contamination with oil has taken place. Any ballast found to be dirty must be treated as if it were tank washings. To minimize pollution from other casualties, there are rules requiring technical assistance to be available ashore, but the SOPEP contains the necessary immediate actions. We have now reached the end of this chapter on Marpol Annex 1 as it applies to oil tankers. We have considered the likely sources of operational and of accidental pollution from oil tankers,